On Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Aaron Mate.
We turn now to Egypt, where new clashes have erupted after a week of relative quiet. At least 7 people were killed and more than 260 wounded in overnight violence, spurred by this month's ouster of President Mohamed Morsi. Supporters of Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood blocked traffic and marched on a key square, angering local residents. Police fired tear gas and birdshot into the crowds, while some protesters threw rocks. It was the worst outbreak of violence since 53 Morsi supporters were killed a week ago. The new unrest came just as the Obama administration resumed efforts to engage in Egypt's political divide. In the first visit by U.S. officials since Morsi's ouster, Deputy Secretary of State William Burns held talks with military leaders and the interim government. Burns told a news conference the U.S. does not want to interfere with Egypt's political process, but hopes all parties will be included.
Their future. I did not come with American solutions, nor did I come to lecture anyone. We know that Egyptians must forge their own path to democracy. We know that this will not mirror our own, and we will not try to impose our model on Egypt. What the United States will do is stand behind certain basic principles, not any particular personalities or parties. If representatives of some of the largest parties in Egypt are detained or excluded, how are dialogue and participation possible? The government itself has said it wants inclusion of all political streams. We've called on the military to avoid any politically motivated arrests, and we have also called upon those who differ with the government to adhere to their absolute obligation to participate peacefully.
In his remarks, the Deputy U.S. Secretary of State William Burns continued the Obama administration's refusal to label Morsi's ouster a coup, thereby protecting the $1.5 billion in U.S. aid. The Muslim Brotherhood says it's refusing to meet with Burns, as has the group Tamarat, which helped drive Morsi from power. While the U.S. has claimed neutrality, both sides of Egypt's political divide have accused the other of collaborating with Washington. The Muslim Brotherhood has maintained a daily vigil calling for Morsi's release from military custody and reinstatement to office. It's also rejected a role in the interim Egyptian government, complicating ongoing efforts to form a new cabinet. In an escalation of the standoff between the two sides, Egypt's public prosecutor Monday ordered the arrest of 7 senior Muslim Brotherhood and Islamist figures on allegations of inciting violence. Muslim Brotherhood leader Mohammed Badi and other top officials were indicted on similar charges last week. For more, we go to Cairo, Egypt, where we're joined by Democracy Now! Correspondent Sharif Abdel Kouddous. Talk about the latest, the violence overnight, Sharif.
Right, as you mentioned, there were clashes in downtown Cairo and across the river in Giza that came after the sunset meal that marks the breaking of the fast during the month of Ramadan. And I think, these clashes, they were the first since the violence last week that we saw that left over 50 Morsi supporters dead outside the Republican Guard headquarters. But they came after what looks like an escalation by the Muslim Brotherhood and Morsi's supporters to, the protests had largely been at the Rabaa Adawiya Mosque, which is a neighborhood in a part of Cairo in Nasser City, and they seem to want to make their voices heard and go to different parts of the city. And yesterday they closed down the 6th of October Bridge, which is a main artery through Cairo. They closed down other bridges and main thoroughfares, creating traffic standstill. And then police and local residents of neighborhoods got into clashes with the Brotherhood and Morsi supporters. So we saw a lot of tear gas and shotguns and things of this nature, and over 400 people were arrested as well. So it seems that the Morsi supporters want to continue to escalate their protests. They're not getting a lot of coverage on the private TV networks that are more supportive of the military. And I think also that their continued insistence on Morsi being reinstated is not a realistic demand, but it's one that helps to mobilize their base, to keep their people in the squares, and also, frankly, it avoids the movement asking difficult internal questions about the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood that brought it to this political crisis.
Sharif, when you reported on the ouster of Morsi earlier this month, you said Egypt was back to square one, back to the day of the ouster of Mubarak in February 2011. So can you compare today's square one back with that period, back with when Mubarak was overthrown?
Well, yeah, I said that in reference to the procedural democratic transition that we have been going through. So it erased all these elections that we had, the referenda on constitutional amendments, and finally the Constitution. So, the difference is now is that we're going through another army-led transition that is very similar to the last one, and I think is making very similar mistakes. It's a very rushed timetable. The constitutional declaration was issued without any consultation from opposition parties who were pushing for Morsi's ouster, and they have spoken out about that. So there's no there isn't a real process for reconciliation that we can see. There's a national reconciliation that's supposed to be starting with the interim president Adli Mansour and also with the Sheikh of Al-Azhar and so forth. But with this continued violence in the streets, with this continued crackdown on not just Brotherhood members but also other leading Islamist figures, it's very difficult to see how real reconciliation can happen. And finally, we're seeing also a resurgence of this kind of nationalism and national amnesia almost that is applauding the army and the security forces to crack down with impunity and to lead the country in this transition. And we have to remember that this is the same army that really mismanaged the first transition, helped lead us to this political crisis in the first place, that is guilty of many crimes itself that were documented in a fact-finding commission commissioned by the ousted president. And so, the jailers should themselves be jailed. And so that's the situation we're in, but it's a very polarizing atmosphere right now, much more polarized than the kind of the pluralistic feeling we had on February 11th, where Islamists and non-Islamists and everyone was kind of together. Now we have this very polarized and vitriolic atmosphere, which is dangerous and can usher in a new kind of, or a deeper authoritarianism.
Associated Press reporter Matt Lee challenged State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki to say explicitly that the U.S. urged Egypt to release President Mohamed Morsi. Psaki would not oblige.
Are calling for him to be
Our
released.
position's the same.
Can you say that? You were still...
The politically motivated detentions.
Including of President Morsi.
Yes.
Can you say that?
I think I just said it, Matt. I don't think we need to play this game.
Can you use his name, please? Because Deputy Secretary Burns was very careful not to mention his name. And so I would like to know, can you just say, if your position is the same as last week when you said we think that he should be released, can you say the same thing today?
Do you just enjoy the sound of my voice?
I do.
Okay.
I do. This is a serious question.
Well,
I realize it.
She didn't say it last week. She just nodded and said yes.
What do you think should happen to the president?
Can I just finish? Hold on. Can you say...
The question last week was, do we agree with the call of the Germans? And I said yes. Our position is the same.
Why can you not say...
Matt, I'm not playing this game. Dana?
It's not really a game.
It's off of what Matt's saying,
okay.
Which is like, well, what do you think should happen to the former president of Egypt?
Well, it's not for us to decide. It's for the Egyptian people to decide what his role will be moving forward.
Could you take the question as to why uttering President Morsi, Mohamed Morsi's name is taboo? I would like to know that answer.
There you have the back and forth at the State Department with Associated Press reporter Matt Lee questioning State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki. Sharif, your response.
Yeah, the State Department and the Obama administration are jumping through hoops to try and not really stake out any position that looks to be favoring one side or the other. It's very, if they say the word coup or that the military ousted Morsi, that triggers requirements by U.S. law for them to halt the aid, which is a cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, 1.5 billion, 1.3 billion of which goes directly to the military. So the military is the main benefactor of U.S. aid and, of course, defense corporations in the United States. But, just a few days after Morsi's ouster, American officials said that they were going to go ahead with the delivery of 4 F-16 jets to Egypt as part of a 2010 agreement. And we know that the ties between the military in Egypt and the Pentagon are very close, and they have been for many years. So, I don't foresee the U.S. cutting off aid anytime soon, but there are a lot of people who are pushing for this, some of them in Congress, including people like John McCain, and calling for a halt to the aid until they can move back to civilian government. I think the head of the armed forces here was smart to very quickly, at least procedurally, hand over power to an interim president who's the head of Supreme Constitutional Court, and they're forming a technocratic cabinet. Of course, I don't think anyone has any misgivings about who's actually pulling the strings and who's actually in power, and that is the military.
Sharif, what about the role of the old regime? We have reports now that basic services that were absent during Morsi are now coming back all of a sudden. Do you think that there was a deliberate effort to destabilize Morsi's government? And how is that playing out now?
I think there's no question that there was elements of the former regime that worked from the very beginning to undermine the Muslim Brotherhood, to undermine the Morsi presidency. This is politics. As soon as Obama's elected, you see the Republicans working to undermine his presidency. But there's been deeper claims of a conspiracy that the fuel shortages that we saw, especially very long lines in the lead up to the June 30th protests, were somehow manipulated by the old state bureaucracy. I don't think we have any smoking gun evidence of that yet. It may very well be the case, given the timing of it. It may also be a simple case of hoarding of gas, and we've seen several instances of these fuel crises happen. But to the broader point, I think that yes, of course, and we're seeing this now. The elements of the former regime, the state security apparatus, the military, looking to ride a very legitimate wave of popular anger and popular unrest at Morsi, and looking to reassert itself in the post-Morsi period. And we're seeing that happen we're seeing that happen right now with this crackdown on the Islamists, with this intense propaganda campaign not to criticize the military. Anyone who speaks out is vilified as being supporting the Islamists and against the revolution and so forth. So, it's a very complicated situation, and I think there's a very fine line of people, and I think it may be growing a bit, people who support June 30th and the popular uprising against Morsi, but who are against July 3rd, the military coup that overthrew him, and would have liked to have seen the popular uprising continue, not be halted by this coup and the army instilling this roadmap. But they're, I think, in a minority right now. But if history is any judge, recent history in Egypt, then people, as we've seen so many times, if this authoritarianism continues, I think we're going to see another mass mobilization that will, look to overcome that authoritarianism.
Sharif, one of the people the New York Times is focused on, reportedly playing a key role in the protests, Naguib Sawiris, the billionaire and opponent of Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood, who said he backed the opposition group Tamarad by donating offices, boosting media coverage, even commissioning a music video without the group realizing he was involved. They talk about him as being involved with those energy shortages, and the minute Morsi was out, suddenly the gas was flowing. What is the significance of him? Where does he fit into the political landscape and this connection to Tamarad?
Well, in some ways, I think that this is being overplayed. But Naguib Sawiris is Egypt's richest businessman. He's a telecommunications tycoon who had comfortable relations with the Mubarak regime, and made much of his fortune during that time. However, and he founded a political party called the Free Egyptians Party. He ran and opposed Morsi and the Brotherhood and was very outspoken against them. So he's a member of, the formal political opposition. The fact that he helped fund Tamarud, apparently without Tamarad's knowledge, I don't find that surprising. This was a political campaign, a petition against the president. So Again, I think this speaks to the larger point. Was there figures who looked to benefit from Morsi's ouster that were either tied to the former regime or would benefit economically or politically? Of course there was. And, I think we saw them manipulate and aggravate existing tensions against the Morsi government to help topple him. However, that doesn't, I think, take away from there was over 9,000 protests and strikes against Morsi in his year in office. So there was a legitimate popular uprising that was happening as well. And like we've seen so many times in the past, these state elites are riding this wave of anger to jockey themselves into power and keep essentially the structure of the authoritarian state intact. So this has happened time and again. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people have learned from the experience of the past. And the military has come back to wide applause from many sectors of Egyptian society. So we'll have to see what happens going forward.
Sharif, the Muslim Brotherhood has said it will not meet U.S. officials until its demands are met. This is a senior official of the Muslim Brotherhood's Freedom and Justice Party, Fareed Ismail.
America are the ones who carried out the military coup. It is not that they recognized it. No, they are the ones who carried out the coup. We are aware, and we have specific information about the communication that preceded the coup, which proves that America made the coup and General al-Sisi executed it. So for that reason, they come to visit them and they come to recognize them. They are the ones who carried out the coup.
That's Fareed Ismail, a senior official of the Muslim Brotherhood. Sharif, what is the Muslim Brotherhood's strategy here? They've been holding these daily rallies, thousands of supporters, but facing repression.
Yeah, it's difficult to say. I mean, they claim in the media, senior leaders say that they're not in negotiations. However, there have been some reports that some of their members, their senior members, are negotiating with the military, negotiating with the interim government. I think that that's probably likely the case. They're a very pragmatic movement. I think there's two things here. One is to keep this mobilization, this mass mobilization they have going, and appeal to their base. They're insisting on the illegitimacy of the new government. They're insisting on the reinstatement of Morsi, which is a very unlikely prospect. And so that helps rally their base and also helps, as I said before, helps them to avoid very difficult questions and kind of a stock-taking of their political decisions over the last year that helped lead them to this crisis. So that's on the one front. They have, as you said, decided to not meet with U.S. officials. But as you mentioned in the beginning of the segment, both sides blame the United States for what they see as backing the other side. So the Morsi government, and the Muslim Brotherhood, cannot see a scenario in which the military stepped in without getting a green light from its U.S. paymasters. And on the other side, Tamarrud and other groups are very critical of what they see as a very warm embrace of the Obama administration of the Muslim Brotherhood and Morsi very quickly. So we have this very, very palpable anger against the United States that I haven't seen at this level before since I've been here. And as far as the Muslim Brotherhood goes forward, I think as an organization, this is a very, very pivotal moment for them. And I think what they're fighting for now is to not to go back to the repression that they were under for 30 years, well, really for 60 years under these autocratic regimes, to be able to participate in the political process. And I think if the army continues to try and crack down on them and to finish them off, that will only really serve to make them more hardline and would marginalize reformist voices within the movement. And we've seen that happen so many times. And this latest conservative wing that has taken over the leadership in the last 3 years, I think is a result of so much repression under Mubarak. And if this repression continues under this military regime, then I think we're going to see them. We won't see much reform, or reform will be held off from within the movement.
Very quickly, Sharif, the front page top story of the New York Times: Egypt's liberals embracing army in turnaround, and it talks about a hyper-nationalist euphoria unleashed in Egypt by the toppling of Morsi. In the pro-democracy groups, the youth groups, where are they now? Are they in the streets, or are they working with the government? Where are they?
Well, this is, as I said, it's a very divisive atmosphere, and we're seeing, some people who are very, very critical of the military when it had the direct administration of the country and who protested on the streets, some of whom were jailed, now warmly embrace the military and be very critical of anyone who speaks out. And people who do speak out are vilified, are attacked very viciously. So it is a very worrying sign, and it's this kinds of atmosphere that allows institutions like the army and the state security apparatus to really flex their muscles and come in strong and say they're providing security.
Sharif, very quickly, not to interrupt, but we just wanted to play this one clip of Deputy Secretary of State William Burns saying recent developments in Egypt don't undermine the democratic transition underway in the country.
We support the adoption of reforms that can lead to an early IMF agreement while sustaining funding for social safety net programs. We believe these measures offer a path to address the entirely justifiable aspirations of the revolution and realize the economic potential of Egypt and its people.
We have 20 seconds for your response, where Egypt's going.
Well, in terms of the economy, we saw this huge injection of cash and loans and grants and gas come from Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait, which totaled $12 billion. And the new member of the Minister of Planning has said that they're not going to pursue the IMF loan, which requires a very difficult restructuring of subsidies, because that this money will kind of carry them through before they have a popular elected government. So we'll have to see. As you know, Egypt changes from day to day, week to week, so it's very unpredictable.
Sharif, I want to thank you for being with us. Sharif Abdel Kouddous, Democracy Now! Correspondent in Cairo, also Nation Fellow. And we'll link to his articles at democracynow.org.